This video is made possible thanks to my supporters, especially Wes, John Matter, and Clownkeeper. Thank you all so much, guys. So, Sonic 3 recently released to widespread acclaim, beloved by critics and fans. First time for everything, right Sega? And you know what? Despite absolutely adoring the last two films, I was skeptical for this one. It was clear they wanted to go in a much bigger direction in terms of scope. Shadow, the introduction of Robotnik's grandfather Gerald. You know, they clearly wanted to go above and beyond for the first movie in the franchise that was attempting to directly adapt from the games themselves. Sure, the first movie established the basic Sonic and Eggman dynamic, and I'm so incredibly grateful for how simple they kept things in terms of the roles the humans had, and in terms of how many actual Sonic characters there were. And the second movie went a bit more in depth with its adaptations. Ice Cap, the Master Emerald, introducing Gun. You know, they were taking bits and pieces from the games and pulling it into this world. But Sonic 3 is the first one, I'd say at least, to be the first movie in the Sonic franchise to directly adapt a game, this one being Sonic Adventure 2. Now, yes, there are some creative liberties that were taken here, like Gerald being alive and Gun not being created as a result of Maria's death, but for the most part it's one-to-one. I think the first thing worth discussing will be the story itself. Now, there will be spoilers in this video, just a fair word of warning, because I'd like to get my true, unfiltered thoughts out, so if you're not fussy about spoilers, keep watching, and if you are, well, I don't know, come back after you've seen the movie, I guess. Now, the story here is simple. It's Sonic's Earth Day birthday, and unfortunately for him, it gets interrupted by Gun, who spotted a mysterious black hedgehog raining havoc on the city of Tokyo, who, in the scene just before this, was shown to be the ultimate life form, Shadow the Hedgehog, and it's up to Sonic and friends to stop it. Now, Shadow was found by Professor Gerald Robotnik as opposed to created by him like in Sonic Adventure 2, from a fallen meteor. Shadow was then placed within a testing tube where he met the Professor's granddaughter Maria. Maria and Shadow became great friends, and that bond lasted until she was killed by a Gun soldier, to which Shadow seeks revenge on Gun to get payback for what they did to Maria. You know, they fucking killed her. That's basically it for the general story setup. I'm probably not going to go as in-depth with the story from here on out, but I felt the general setup was worth mentioning. I actually really love the interactions between Sonic and Shadow here. I'm only really going to mention those ones between the two of them because they end up having some of the most out of all the animated characters. At first, they have such a great dynamic. It's natural that Sonic, seemingly the only hedgehog of his kind on the planet, would have questions as to why there's another hedgehog that looks like him. Unfortunately, that reference as to why they look so similar is lost, since the connection between Super Sonic and Shadow's spines doesn't exist, since Gerald wasn't basing Shadow's creation off of murals of Super Sonic. Weird nitpick, I'm aware, but I wanted to mention it. I think the two of them are such a believable dynamic, they're really connected. Surprisingly though, Shadow actually warms up to Sonic towards the end of the movie. Okay, well, surprising for those who haven't played Adventure 2, I guess. Especially after the talk they have on the moon towards the end of the movie. I absolutely love the fact that Shadow remembered what Maria told him and relayed it to Sonic. And I think the fact that it's such a lovely metaphor definitely helped that. You know, whether or not someone is still here, their impact can still be felt. It was exactly what was needed in order for the two of them to connect, and I think it succeeded in making them have a believable want to team up and stop the Robotniks by the end. And trust me, having an impactful message was not something I was expecting from this movie. I also think that fight right before this, which leads them to being on the moon in the first place, really adds to the meaning of the words that Shadow says. I think that if the scene were completely omitted, the moon scene wouldn't have been anywhere near as powerful. I think the movie does a really good job on translating the ending of Adventure 2 onto the big screen. I thought it really stuck to the source material, despite what creative liberties were taken. This doesn't just feel like a sloppily put together cash grab to end a trilogy. It feels like a true love letter to the franchise, and I couldn't be any more happy about that. I also love how the two Robotniks act, them bonding more and more as time goes on, Eggman eventually firing Agent Stone because he believes whatever his grandfather does is right. They have such a sweet bond which does eventually turn sour for a more thrilling climax, and I think that Jim Carrey does a really amazing job acting as both of these characters. Like, you know, that couldn't have been easy for him. Having to pretend that another character was there, especially another character that's played by you, he's insanely talented, and he kills it as always. Ben Schwartz, Idris Elba, and Clayton O'Shaughnessy all do great performances too. Ben especially had improved vastly since the first Sonic film. I felt that in the first movie a lot of the delivery was weird and stilted, but I'm proud to announce that in Sonic 3 he's near perfect. And can I just say how fantastic of a pick Keanu Reeves was for the voice of Shadow? I genuinely couldn't have picked anyone better myself. In fact, I think Reeves' performance might be the best Shadow voice we've ever had, maybe only second to Jason Griffith's one. When it was first announced that John Wick of all people would be voicing Shadow, I was sincerely worried. I wasn't exactly sure whether or not he'd be a right fit for the character, but after the first trailer featuring Shadow's new voice had dropped,
when we're done, there won't be anything left. Hey, no cheat code!
I was ecstatic. I mean, he sounded absolutely amazing. Alright, enough gushing about Shadow the Hedgehog, let's move on. I think that this movie is really good for fan service, and that is far from a complaint. Although every little chance the writers get, they shove in little references to the games, comics, and past Sonic movies. Throughout my time watching the movie, I noticed a plethora of references to the first film. Even if at times it does sort of feel like they sat people down and had them watch the first Sonic movie and then sent them straight into the writer's room. There are also plenty of really cool references to stuff that I thought would never be mentioned again. There's references to Lost World here where his mustache gets partially cut off. There's a reference to Sonic f***ing Boom at the end of the movie when the heroes return to the Earth. And oh man, it's just so cool. My jaw also completely dropped when they brought back Super Shadow for the first time since his self-titled game in 2005. No, we're not going to count Sonic 06. I absolutely adore the fact that they brought back Super Shadow for one of the most hype endings throughout this entire franchise. That ending scene was also really nicely complemented by a full remix of Crush 40's Live and Learn. And whilst it is only short, it sounds absolutely incredible. The one real nitpick I have with them making references to stuff is when they have the two Robotniks look at each other and then point out the fact that they're both being played by the same actor. That genuinely made me groan. I hate when stuff like this is in media that's intended to be taken seriously. Like when Family Guy does it, sure, I never take that show seriously, since that's its humour. But when the Sonic movie does it, even as just a one-off little gag, I despise it. Really took me out of the world for a moment. But I'm aware I'm mostly alone on that. It got a few laughs out of the people who were in the cinema with me, so I suppose the joke did as intended. Actually, small tangent out the humour. I thought it was pretty good for the most part. Just wasn't as funny as the previous two movies. I thought Sonic 1, especially during this later act, was really funny, and the second movie too. I think it's undoubtedly something that comes from the more serious tone and bigger scope of the movie, but there were a few times that still made me laugh. Also worth mentioning is the very slight redesign given to Sonic. It's not too noticeable, but he's been given slightly shorter spines and a lighter blue tone on his fur, presumably done to match how he looks in Frontiers and Forces. Actually, speaking of visuals, I think the increased budget here is insanely obvious. Every one of the CG characters here looks absolutely fantastic, the animation is far better than it ever has been, and the detail on these characters just seem to get higher and higher with each entry in the series. I just wish the games followed suit. The actual sets themselves too look very impressive, and overall the presentation of the world looks way better than the first two movies. It makes me really happy to see that they're actually putting their increased budget to use. And I would like to comment on the movie's score, but I don't really know much about music, so I'll just leave it at the fact that it was good and Live and Learn was really not expected. I really enjoyed that part of the movie. Not sure where I take the franchise from here though. The post-credit scene showcased that we'd be getting Metal Sonic and Amy as a part of the movie universe, which has led me and many others to speculate that we're going to be getting a Sonic CD adaptation next. Could also be an Adventure 1 adaptation too, but whatever comes next, I'm insanely excited. I think this was an absolutely brilliant way to cap off the year of Shadow, especially after the release of Sonic X Shadow Generations and its movie DLC, which I'll for sure talk about eventually. The first half of the decade too. I think that the 2020s so far have been great for Sonic. With 3 movies, a couple of new games, 2 new TV shows as well, it's been insane. Can only hope that the momentum keeps picking up from here. But for now, I'm just excited for the future of not only the Sonic franchise, but future video game movies too. Okay, well maybe except the Minecraft movie.